Our first guest has spent more than 2 decades devoted to defending survivors of sexual assault, harassment, and even human trafficking. Here with more is Micha Star Liberty. Hi, Micha. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Can you give us a little background on you and how you got into defending survivors of sexual assault, harassment, and even human trafficking?
Yeah, it's, I always feel like I'm a walking trigger warning because the topics I talk about can be so difficult for folks to hear about. So I just want to give that little warning as we start. When I was 17 years old, a very good friend of mine who was a ballerina like I went to a performing arts school in San Diego, California. And my dear friend Amber had graduated before me. One morning in September, I was still a senior in high school, as I said. She went to the gym like she normally did, keeping up with her dance and her fitness. And she came home and went to get into the shower. And when she turned on that shower, unbeknownst to her, a man entered her home. He pulled her out of the shower and raped and murdered her. Her mother came home a little while later. They're not really sure how long, but probably half an hour, 40 minutes later. And this man, who is on death row here in California, named Cleophas Prince, was still in the home. And unfortunately, Amber's mom, Pam, met the same fate. And as a young girl, 17 years old, at her funeral, I didn't know what it would look like, but I committed myself and my life to helping victims of violence and sexual violence in particular. So it started with volunteering at rape crisis centers. And then I, after college, went to work in politics because I thought public policy was the way to go. I was an intern at the White House, learned some lessons about power dynamics and sexual harassment while there, and then went to work on the Hill for 2 different members of Congress. But I was frustrated with how slow public policy goes and how long it takes for good pieces of legislation to get through those processes. So I left DC, went to law school. And once I started practicing, I was representing survivors of sexual violence.
So what are some of the biggest obstacles that you've had to overcome?
Well, in terms of the cases, prior to the Me Too movement, just establishing credibility with jurors and judges, it wasn't that long ago that sexual harassment laws got passed, and we didn't get many of the sex trafficking or anti-sex trafficking legislation passed federally until the early 2000s. So just convincing people that these are real things that happen because they're so horrible. Most people don't want to believe that this can happen and that these are real life situations. So it's that kind of awareness that I try to bring to all of my cases. In terms of just being a litigator day to day in these cases, one of the biggest challenges is helping clients through the trauma that they've experienced, and helping them prepare to do things like testify at a deposition or appear in court and provide a victim's impact statement. And then lastly, I'll mention, making sure my staff is trauma informed so they're not triggering our clients' trauma responses, but also so they're protected, because secondary trauma can really impact people who work with trauma survivors day in and day out. And we want to keep the staff healthy and the organization healthy, because even organizations can be traumatized or impacted by secondary trauma, or what we call compassion fatigue.
You have to have some success stories that show you that your commitment to defending these folks is the right thing to do and should be your passion. Can you share some of those success stories with us?
Absolutely. I've helped folks from young children seek accountability and justice to older folks who are in retirement homes. I've helped a number of special needs individuals who've been sexually abused and assaulted. I mean, there really is no one who is safe. There's no specific target other than people who are vulnerable and who might not be able to fight off an attack, or who are not sophisticated enough to understand that when someone is reaching out to them online, for example, that they're actually grooming them and trying to pull them into the trafficking cycle. So, every day I am grateful about even the smallest accomplishments my clients are able to achieve. But every time we settle a case, and whether or not we can bring a civil case, we always help our clients through the criminal process pursuant to Marcy's Law. That's the Crime Victims Bill of Rights. Mm-hmm. And even just being able to help and support them through those kinds of processes that have nothing to do with our own litigation is so rewarding and so helpful to clients.
What do you think Amber and her mom would think about what you're doing and what you've done with your life?
I probably Amber would be very demure and shy about it. She was not a boastful woman, even though she had, or young woman, even though she had a perfect pirouette. She was humble and kind. And I hope she would appreciate it. I hope she's proud of the work that I do, because I really am fighting for her and for other people's children to keep them safe every day.
Tell us a little bit about your upcoming book.
Yeah, so I'm writing a book called Evolutionista, and it really is about the kind of revolutionary process that sexual assault victims go through when they seek accountability. There's so much that's unknown to survivors. They don't know how to report to the police. They don't know what kind of civil lawyer to look for. And they really don't have any understanding of what it means to, for example, participate in the criminal justice process. They don't know what it looks like to litigate in a civil case. So it is really an attempt to demystify all of the processes. It's also an attempt to explain the different types of treatment and therapies that are out there. It's a way to explain what they should be looking for when they're interviewing attorneys to take their case. And then also there are personal stories from things I've experienced and a lot of women and girls on this planet have experienced, things I've learned along the way. And then at the very end, we tackle a subject that's very challenging, which is the recidivism rates we see with offenders. Our system right now is not doing what it needs to be doing to decrease recidivism. And what we know based on the science is that accountability and the perpetrator having to take responsibility for these horrific acts actually reduces recidivism. So if they're doing these crimes and getting away with them, they're going to keep doing them. And the science says they're going to get more and more aggressive, more and more violent. So we really have to do everything we can to get accountability early.
There are probably some folks watching that have bottled up something that has happened to them because they feel embarrassed or ashamed. What do you want to tell those people?
That there's nothing to be ashamed of. We have a culture that unfortunately has engaged in a lot of victim blaming. And, there is good and bad about the Me Too movement, but one of the best things that it did was to let survivors, whether they're men, women, or children, know they're not alone. And that there are people out there that are going to believe you because they've had the same experience or because they've seen these types of crimes happen over and over and over. we've done at my law firm and my consulting firm a lot of legislative advocacy around the country to try and get statutes of limitations changed. Because what we know is it takes so long for survivors to recognize and be able to actually name and admit what happened to themselves. Mm-hmm. So if they can't even acknowledge, I was sexually assaulted, I was raped, we can't expect them to feel safe and comfortable going to the police or going to a lawyer. So it's a long process, and that's why we need statutes of limitations to be abolished or extended for very long periods of time.
And Micha, quickly, because we're running out of time here, but how can folks get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Sure. The book will be out in the fall. Evolutionista.com is the website. They can also reach out to me at my law firm, libertylaw.com. I'm happy to talk through with anyone who is contemplating reporting or just needs access to resources. I'm happy to provide examples, websites, other books to read. There really is a wealth of information, and there are huge communities all over the country who want to support survivors. So reach out anytime.
Micha Star Liberty, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.